Well, it's official in the SEC. They've got Texas and they've got Oklahoma. Do they need any more?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and so much more. We've always got you covered, furry friends included, getting you ready for the season. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. That's Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC. We'll have JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes later because Kyle Whittingham's time in Salt Lake City kind of looks like it's not long for the road. But Texas and Oklahoma are long for the SEC. And I think about it like this, Chris. It's really unique because I don't feel like the SEC needs to expand now that they have Texas and Oklahoma. I don't feel like they want to. And yet the possibility of them doing so is 100% real.
Well, it's all about money, and it's all about not being left in the dark, and where does this thing continue to evolve? And so, Greg Sankey can stand in front of a microphone and say all he wants. We think 16 is good. That's a hard, good, hard, firm number. If the reality, happens that the ACC starts to crumble and they lose structure, just like we just said goodbye this week to the Pac-12 permanently, if the ACC shows any signs of crumbling, there are going to be some big brands there, particularly FSU and Clemson, that other conferences are going to want to come poach. And the SEC is going to do their damnedest to make sure the Big Ten doesn't step in front of them and grab them. And so, again, a lot has to happen here. Those TV contracts with the ACC, they're going to court over them. And, they're pretty firm on there that, it's another, almost a decade still that Clemson and Florida State would have to wait out without paying a monster penalty to get out of it. But I think the reality does exist that, some of the big power conferences are going to look to still continue to poach. And, I just think mathematically it doesn't make much sense. Like, why call yourself a conference if you're going to have 20 teams and you don't play everybody every year or at least every couple of years? But, the big thing is bigger pool of money. And so if you bring in two bigger brands that bring in even more money and more eyeballs, that, it's a bigger share of the pie. That's a big reason why, somebody asked me the other day, why the hell would A&M, agree to let Texas into the conference? Like, that's big brother, little brother. Why would they let them in? And the reality is money. Greg Sankey wrote a number on a piece of paper. He goes, here's the number you're making right now, and here's the number when we had Texas and Oklahoma. Deal? And obviously it was a much higher number. And so it sucks. This is the world we live in. As much as I want to say it's about passion and rivalry and, tradition and, we need to preserve rivalries and all this. The current leaders of college football are saying, bleep all that. It's all about the Benjamins.
Yeah, I don't know that the addition of Texas had in mind, though it should have, frankly, but it wasn't. I don't think they had in mind, let's rekindle this rivalry that is among the most spirited and passionate in the entire country, which is one of the parts of realignment, as you and I talked about last we spoke on this show, that I actually like about these moves is that those sorts of rivalries can come back. But I think that Kansas and Missouri not playing football regularly is just a travesty for the sport, because I think that was once upon a time a great matchup. And there have been so many other ones, Nebraska leaving the Big 12, going to the Big 10. Like, it's just all these moves are strange and odd. And I think about the prospect of the SEC adding an FSU or Clemson. Yeah, that fits. But then I hear or read things about, well, what about North Carolina? What if they went and got Virginia? What about Georgia Tech? And I just go, that doesn't feel like it moves the needle enough. Anybody not FSU or Clemson, I don't think there's an ACC team, maybe Miami, that moves the needle enough to where the SEC would give in and say, yeah, okay, we have these two schools, but we're going to go another level here, and we have to go get this team over here.
Well, there's another element outside of brands, right? When we think brands, we think, Clemson, Florida State. I mean, those are monster brands. Miami. But there's another element too, and that's eyeballs and TV dollars and new markets. And that's the big thing that when I've talked to Greg Sankey in years past, he's brought up and others behind the scenes have brought up that for the SEC, the appeal is not to add a Clemson because you already have South Carolina in the Palmetto State. So while, it's probably 50-50 maybe fandom in that state, same thing goes with Florida. You have the Florida Gators in the state of Florida. You don't necessarily need Florida State. There's a lot of Florida fans in the Panhandle already. What the argument was, add a whole new state, add a market you're not in, like North Carolina, like Virginia. They're still somewhat in the southern footprint, but like you add North Carolina, suddenly you have a whole state of new eyeballs of Tar Heel fans tuning in. And that's where the dollars and cents start to make sense. My wife was an econ major. I'm not. I don't know the first thing about economics, but at least that stuff makes sense to me because, you want to get in places where you're not as opposed to states you're already in. I mean, okay, you add Florida State eyeballs, great, but it's okay. It's just another percentage of the state you're already in. So that's part of it too. But again, we'll see what happens. I mean, people like to make the case, North Carolina get the basketball. That's great, man, but go look at the revenue numbers.
No, it's not close.
Football is the decisions that make all these decisions. It's not basketball as great as it is. And yes, it would be awesome to have North Carolina versus Kentucky regularly every year.
It's great.
Basketball, it's the football games that's driving the revenue.
Yeah, and I think that basketball is like the cherry on top, but it's not the sundae, okay? It's not the banana, the ice cream, and the whipped cream. It's just cherry on top. You're like, you know what? I would like to have it there if I have the option. I want to get you out of here on this as Texas and Oklahoma are now officially members of the SEC. Texas threw a big party. I think they had a concert. I forget who the artist was. Pitbull, yeah, that's right. They rolled out the red carpet for their entrance into the SEC. Texas has lofty goals this year. They're tied for the highest win total in all of college football. And Oklahoma is, not coming in betting-wise with the same sorts of odds. But as they move into the SEC, look, it just means more. It's different. It's the best league, most national championships, all that sort of stuff. Where do you see these schools fitting into the structure of SEC football?
Yeah, I mean, the easy one is Georgia, Texas, because them and Georgia have been the two preseason picks by a lot of people, and people have high expectations for Texas. You made it to the playoff last year, so let's see if you could do it again. Quinn Ewers is back at quarterback. So, they're expected to be at worst 10-2, but still make it to the playoff and compete for an SEC title. Oklahoma's an interesting one. A lot of people are saying, we're acting like Oklahoma didn't win 10 games a year ago. I know it was with Dylan Gabriel, but Jackson Arnold's a 5-star quarterback, and they have high hopes for him. It's the same reason why, they went with Dylan Gabriel over Spencer Rattler a couple years ago. They showed more promise, big-time recruit. Well, Jackson Arnold's that guy, and if he can hit the ground running as a freshman, he got the start in the bowl game. It was some good, some bad, some touchdowns, some interceptions. But if that kid can hit the ground running this year, Oklahoma could be a player in the SEC in year one, absolutely. But I just wonder the toll of an SEC schedule. You're playing – the foundation of SEC team is hard-nosed in the trenches, offensive and defensive line. I just wonder the wear and tear on your bodies when you get into that week 4, week 5, week 6 grind of the conference. Suddenly you find yourself in a dogfight against Arkansas. Suddenly you find yourself in a shootout against Florida. Can you, persevere? That's where the Texases and Oklahomas, I think, are going to have a little bit of a rude awakening and going, this isn't Baylor. This isn't Kansas. Wait, these guys are really – those are all first-round picks right there, offensive linemen, or second-round pick defensive linemen. So that's where I think it'll take its toll, and that's where I think both Oklahoma and Texas have a chance to lose a game they're not supposed to this year because it's going to be a grind of a schedule.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Appreciate it as always, Christopher. Thank you.
Anytime, man.
Apparently, we're going to go back to the former conference of these teams, the Big 12. Kyle Whittingham is going to be gone really, really soon. How soon? We'll discuss that coming up next. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, and I love them so much, I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to, and FanDuel is there to let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. How about that? 7 days a week, 24/7, 365. They are there. You have every college football bet you could possibly want to explore. It's even fun to just go look around and see what FanDuel and the odds makers think about certain teams, including your team, whoever that may be. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Is Kyle Whittingham about to retire? Is he about to coach his last season? That is JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes here to help me answer that question. They named Morgan Scalley publicly the head coach in waiting. Pete Thamel first reported, at least that I saw, and that makes me think, JT, there are no more than 2 seasons of Utah football being coached by Kyle Whittingham.
And you would be correct in that. I honestly feel I wouldn't be shocked to see Kyle Whittingham hang it up after this year, right? I mean, there's a lot of interesting factors that go into that. Kyle Whittingham has kind of said before he doesn't want to coach past a certain age. He's creeping up on that age at 65. Look, this also feels like the kind of right time for him to exit in terms of Utah will turn over a lot after this year. Cam Rising came back for this year. Brant Keithy came back for this year. And that's just scratching the surface of Utah guys who were a part of both of the Pac-12 championship teams. I expect a lot to change after this year for Utah's roster. I think a lot of guys will depart. He's helped them navigate the transition from Pac-12 to the Big 12. It makes a lot of sense why Kyle Whittingham might feel like now is the time. 20 years is a long time of anything, and especially running a college football program. And I think it wears on you. And there are many coaches who are even older than Kyle Whittingham, but those are coaches who have been waiting for the opportunity to earn that head coaching job versus Kyle's been doing it for a long time now. The game has also changed, the recruiting game. And while he's adapted to it well, I can't imagine an old school coach like him loves the state of the game. So all of those factors lead me to believe that he very well could walk away after this year. And I agree with what you said. I would be shocked if 3 years from now he's still coaching Utah.
Yeah, and maybe, him coming back for another year depends on whether Cam Rising could get, an 8th year of eligibility, which I have seen is possible, but not assured at this point in time. Is it that simple, though, that Kyle Whittingham is just getting up there in age, and he said, well, I'm getting close to 65, doesn't want to coach past that time or during that time? Is it that, do you think there is anything football-wise beyond, the individual team afoot? Because certainly Utah is capable of recruiting solidly, but not at an elite level that we've seen. They get guys in the portal, or they don't pull the best guys in the portal. Do you think that there is an element of this for him where he looks at the landscape and says 2 things? Number 1, this is not what I'm used to as a head coach. This is too much new information. But number 2, I feel like we're going to become less competitive rather than more competitive, even in a weaker conference.
I don't feel that's the case. I think he feels good about the state and the direction of the program. I actually think a large reason this is happening is what a good coach Morgan Scalley is. USC has tried to pry him away. A couple years ago when Urban Meyer went to the NFL, he wanted Morgan to come to the NFL with him. A lot of people have wanted Morgan Scalley. So I think this serves in twofold. Number 1, it compensates Morgan more to stay at Utah. And I also think number 2, you mentioned recruiting. So now those recruits, when they walk in and go, Coach Witt, are you going to guarantee me you'll be here for 3 years? He's going to go, no, but my hand-picked replacement will be, who's been on staff for 17 years after this year, who's learned everything from me, who's going to keep the culture and everything in place. I don't think this is about the future of Utah football. I actually think that Utah's in a strong position. You have a 4-star quarterback in the room coming up who's the brother of an NFL guy. Like, he has sky-high potential, I think, still. The Big 12, I just don't think it's as strong as the Pac-12 was last year. And I think Utah, year in and year out, will be competing for conference titles because they should continue to recruit well. This recruiting class is still on par for some of those early ones they won when they were getting to conference championship games and doing all of that. So I do believe this is more just Kyle Whittingham being burnt out than it is him feeling like, it's a shaky ship with Utah right now. I mean, they just landed a 4-star linebacker like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. The other interesting component is the burnout has to be supremely real, because when you look at where Utah fits into the Big 12 this year, they are definitely the favorite. Kansas State is up there. Kansas is up there. But Utah is the favorite. They have been the betting favorite for a while. I think they should be the favorite. I have a hard time picking against them to win the Big 12 going into this year. But when I talk about Utah recruiting not getting to the highest level, that's, compared to the big dogs and everybody nationally. If you look at the Big 12, you don't have those big time recruiting powers. I've heard Josh Pate describe the Big 12 as, quote unquote, America's football conference because they don't have a bunch of teams aside from Colorado. They're, building a majority of their roster through the portal, and they aren't going crazy with NIL, and they aren't recruiting at a high level, and they aren't even going to have a team that's going to win a national championship now or in the next several years. However, it's still a fun league, and people show up. You got a lot of small towns, and people show up because that's the only game in town sometimes, and that's why college sports are so great. And I think Utah is poised to succeed even more. I mean, when they had a healthy starting quarterback, this is a Utah program that in 4 consecutive full seasons of college football played for the Pac-12 championship and won it twice. And I think this league is a lot more gettable. Certainly it has gotten stronger with the addition of the new schools, particularly from the Pac-12. And if Colorado keeps building itself up, then it gets even stronger. But that's what surprises me, I think, the most. Like Nick Saban, you knew one day this was going to happen, but then once you hear that this is actually going to be a thing, it kind of catches you off guard.
It definitely does, and it doesn't. I got to mention one of the strangest things about this whole head coach in waiting thing. This was signed November 23, 2023. They've kept it in-house this long. There have been lots of rumors and rumblings, and the Morgan had this time.
They stopped that from leaking for 7 months.
Yeah, and like we said, they were kind of like, if you asked any Utah fan who was going to be their next head coach, they would have told you Morgan Scalley because he was the head coach in waiting. Then there was a controversy, so he had that taken away over a text he sent in 2013, and so he got suspended, and they took that away from him. But he remained on staff and has been an amazing defensive coordinator for Utah. He's a natural leader. There's just so many Kyle Whittingham isms in Morgan Scalley. He was always the natural guy to become the next head coach. So as I said, if you asked any Utah fan who's going to be the next head coach after Kyle Whittingham, they would have said that would be Morgan Scalley. When you have something as special as Coach Witt has created, I don't think you hire someone outside to change the program drastically. I think you want the same cultural set that you've had success continue to be in place. And that's what Morgan Scalley will do for Utah. So yeah, it's surprising to see, just to realize once again, if they're putting it out in a formal release like this, then it's something where, Coach Witt is getting close, but it's a combination of Coach Witt's getting close. And they really wanted to reassure Morgan Scalley, obviously, hey, please don't go anywhere. You're our guy. We want you to be the next head coach. So I think those two things pairing together are why we see this announcement coming out now. It's very Utah that it took this long for it to get out, but I do think it's best for all parties involved. And I do believe that there might be a slight drop off with Morgan Scalley, but I still expect Utah to be one of the top 15 programs in college football and will be year in and year out among the best in the Big 12.
Yeah, it feels more Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame or Ryan Day at Ohio State than it does Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. Because, as you mentioned, you have these long established cultures with coaches that, have a track record of success and have a uniquely identifiable culture. And maybe there are other teams that kind of replicate it. But you know what Utah football is year in and year out. They look the same now as they did 5, 6, 10, 15 years ago. They really haven't tried to reinvent the wheel. They know what their formula is, and certainly Scalley understands that. Real quick, I'll get you out of here on this, JT. Was it a no doubt proposition in your mind that Morgan Scalley is the guy to replace Kyle Whittingham? Was there any thought to Andy Ludwig, the offensive coordinator, who Notre Dame tried to hire away? Why was it, such a clear-cut choice, it seems, for it to be Scalley?
Morgan Scalley is just more of a leader to me of a team than an Andy Ludwig. I think Andy Ludwig likes to just run his offense, not have to deal with everything a head coach has to deal with. Morgan's personality, his leadership style, his success, I just think it lends itself to being the face of a program a lot. Morgan's had a ton of recruiting success. He's passionate about recruiting too. He's done a great job recruiting Texas, which becomes even more important now that you're in the Big 12. So those leadership qualities, the success that he's had defensively, just always seemed to make him, and just once again, he has been pursued so heavily several times that it's a hot commodity. There's a lot of people that see a great head coach in him because of what he's learned under Kyle Whittingham, on top of the own unique factors from his leadership style, his coaching style. We're talking about a guy in Morgan Scalley who has helped this Utah defense become top 5 nationally ranked in rush defense in 2018, 19, and 2023. And a lot of those guys are back, so they'll have a chance to do it again this year. So he's an elite defensive mind he's done, if you were looking for how to try to contain Caleb Williams, you can't stop him. But Morgan Scalley did as good of a job as anyone in couple of those USC matchups we saw recently too. So an elite defensive mind, a great leader defensively, a guy who embodies everything that Kyle Whittingham is in so many ways. He was always going to be the next head coach for Utah football. Now it's just official.
In Williams' defense, he put up 42 points in one of those games, and in another one, he was a little bit hobbled. But no, I'm not casting dispersions at Morgan Scalley.
That's why I said contain, because even the game he put up 42, the offense wasn't the same in the second half. That's all I'm saying is he helped slow him down. But you're right. I mean, Caleb is incredible.
Yeah, Caleb is very, very good. JT Wistrcill, Locked On Utes, everything you need for Utah football and athletics writ large. Go check him out. JT, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Spencer.
San Diego State is going to be a team to watch for in the college football playoff. Just not this year. So when exactly? That's coming up next. Someday in the not too distant future, I'm going to come onto this show and tell you about how San Diego State, once future Pac-12 member, RIP, is a playoff contender. I don't know if that's this year. I'll get to their transfer portal class, which is mighty impressive. But Sean Lewis is the guy they have hired to be their head coach. This is a program, by the way. When you think power in the Mountain West and premier brands, elite programs, I hope you think about San Diego State just as much as, a Fresno or a Boise, for instance. The Aztecs are coming off of their first losing season in 14 years. I don't care what conference you're in. That's mighty impressive. So this is a place that if you have it rolling correctly and you're operating at the level you should, you're a contender in the conference. And by default, you are a college football playoff contender because we have an auto bid for the group of 5. You can think of that whatever you like. It's not going anywhere this year. It's not going anywhere next year. We'll see what the playoff structure ends up being in 2026 and beyond. I suspect the group of 5 will lobby hard, and I think they'll be successful in maintaining an automatic bid to the college football playoff as the 5th highest ranked conference champion. So the Mountain West champion certainly is on the table for that. And San Diego State, if they were to be a part of rebuilt Pac-12, again, would have access to the playoff there. But Sean Lewis is their head coach. He was most recently seen as the offensive coordinator at Colorado this past year, a job that he took with the intention of landing a larger head coaching position. And though Colorado had an up and down year, and it was an up and down situation, which I didn't really care for as it pertained to Lewis as the offensive coordinator, his mission has been accomplished. He went from Kent State head coach in 2022 to Colorado offensive coordinator. He was stripped of play calling duties despite the offense not actually being the problem. The offensive line could not block a JV high school team, and the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. But Sean Lewis was the problem. Okay. So Lewis then goes down to San Diego State, takes the head coaching opportunity after Brady Hoke says, it's time for me to step aside, and he's brought in quite the transfer portal class. And if you look at what Sean Lewis left behind at Kent State, it wasn't very good. His record isn't going to wow you. He was 24-31 in his time as Kent State's head coach. And guess what? He left and they went 1-11. I think he was pretty good. Do we know if he's great? Yet to be seen. That suggests that Kent State is not the easiest place to win, and he appeared in a couple of bowl games, and he won one of them. Appeared in 2, won 1. So, and in 2022, they kind of set him up to just make money for the athletic department. They played Washington, Oklahoma, and Georgia in the same year. They made like $2 million as a department. That's the way football works at the Group of 5 and FCS level. Such is the way of life. But he goes down to San Diego State, which I am most intrigued by because San Diego State is a place that, as I've mentioned, can be really good if you're doing it right, the early indicators are very good. So Sean Lewis has brought in 25 transfers in this 2024 cycle. 25. Do you know how many are coming down from the Power 4 ranks? They were at Power 4 schools a year ago and are now going to play for San Diego State. That answer is 10. 10 of the 25. I didn't even mention the myriad of Mountain West transfers that decided, oh, yep, I want to go play for him over there. Yeah, I think he can do it. Sean Lewis at Colorado last year was the primary architect, as much as any coach, behind their upset win over TCU. Because that game was not won with Colorado's defense, it was won with their offense. And Sean Lewis was calling that game. He did so masterfully. Now, what's the quarterback situation going to be? Whatever it is for the Aztecs, it's not going to be as strong as Shedeur Sanders, who is a bona fide first-round NFL draft selection. Still, the success he had a year ago leads me to believe, okay, yeah, this guy is a good offensive mind. Okay, yeah, he's got the coaching pedigree where he won at a place that doesn't win a whole heck of a lot of football games. Oh, and here he is early in his tenure bringing in a high level of talent compared to what they were doing previously. Those are three really good indicators. Plus, I think this is a fourth one. It's a little more under the radar. He's got to have a chip on his shoulder. He went to Colorado. The offense was tearing it up. The defense was terrible. The offensive line stunk. There were a bunch of penalties, and he was stripped of play calling duties. By the way, it didn't help anything. I find myself rooting for Sean Lewis for that reason, because I just don't care. I've talked about this with Gus Malzahn at Auburn. I'm rooting for Gus Malzahn. I didn't think Auburn treated him correctly because he got run out of town, and I was like, I don't know, this guy seems pretty good. And then Brian Harsin was worse, and Hugh Freeze is just trying to build it up and undo the damage that was done during those 2 years of illustrious Auburn Tigers football. So I look at those situations, and I just kind of root for those sorts of guys. Sean Lewis is on that list. So when he gets the ball rolling for San Diego State, I have no doubt they will return to be a Mountain West contender. The question is when. The question is how quickly. I don't think it's this year. In spite of the talented transfer portal class, the schedule's tough. I mean, the schedule is tough. Remember, you have to be the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion. I don't think San Diego State in one off season is going to go from 4-8 to you have to be at least 10-3, at least, if not 11-2. I don't think that jump is arriving for the Aztecs. Could they go over their win total of 5.5 and make a bowl game? Yep, I can see it, even with a tough schedule. I can absolutely see that because I think Lewis is good. They've got some nice talented players that they brought in the transfer portal, but it's going to be really, really hard. I think the time for them to become a Mountain West contender and therefore a playoff contender is in the 2 to 3 year range. I think that's the time. I think this year, try to make a bowl game. That's successful. Year 2, win at least 8 games. That's successful. Then year 3 is when you can have the expectation to win a conference championship. Now, those standards for year 2, they can be reset quickly if they come out in year 1 and they go, let's say 8-4 this year. Well, then you'd be looking at the offseason saying, oh, you got to be licking your chops to the transfer portal. Find some more Power 4 drop downs, try to recruit pretty well. I think the recruiting is in a pretty stable spot, slightly above where, kind of the average classes of the Brady Hoke era were at the end. But, if you can have a recruiting class that just kind of pushes to be top 50, that'd be well above where San Diego State typically recruits. But that's not where I'm looking for their talent acquisition. They have the most commitments in the class of 2025 in the entire Mountain West. They got 15 guys pledged to the Aztecs in the upcoming and current-ish, whatever you want to call it, recruiting cycle. That, again, is a really, really good sign because it means he's got an eye for talent, got some connections, and people are buying in to whatever the message he and his staff are selling on the trail. So I'm encouraged by what Sean Lewis is doing so far. The reason I don't put them as anything more than maybe a bowl team this year, here are games that they have to play this year. Now, think about this from a Mountain West standpoint, right? If, Florida goes and plays the schedule, it's a different deal. It's a different ordeal. But here's their schedule. They host Oregon State on September 7th. Not going to be an easy game. They go at Cal the following week. That's going to be a hard game. On October 26th, they host Washington State. Okay, so they've got both of the former Pac-12 schools, who I think are going to be 8 to 9 win teams this year. They go at Boise State November 1st. Good luck. At UNLV November 16th. Look, not the toughest place to play, but a pretty good football team with a good head coach and a good staff. I don't think it's easy. And then their regular season finale is hosting Air Force. Death, taxes, and Air Force winning 8+ games in the Mountain West with Troy Calhoun at the helm again. So I think for the Aztecs, they've made a good hire here. Lewis could be a guy, quite frankly, who finds himself at a bigger school in a few years. He has to rebuild San Diego State into a Mountain West contender. If he does, I could absolutely see him parlaying that into a Big 12 job. Given that he was an offensive coordinator and had success in that realm, I could see that being the case. But for now, if you're an Aztecs fan, you're trying to get back to that conference contending and now for a playoff contending level through that auto bid for the group of 5. That's going to happen, just not this year. Patience, as they say, is a virtue. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.